All right, we are getting started now. Let me make sure that the camera is in a good place and that I can't hear myself on the computer over here. So I've got the live chat set up over on my computer. If I'm looking down from time to time, that means that I am reading the chat. Let's get started. Thanks everybody for being here. Hope everyone is doing well. It's evening time over in Europe, so happy evening to you. Hope dinner was awesome. Here it just is like middle afternoon. It's going to be a good day so far. So let's see what we have in the chat. Mini Performance, thanks for joining. Yes, could you please call the IT group, please, so that they can fix this? Mini Man Shed, welcome. Louis, and Wired, don't forget pliers. Joe Mergens, welcome to the live chat. Flat Cap Garage, good evening. Mini Matt TV, hey everybody. This is, I'm going to let people get in here in a minute, but the way that I'm doing this is a little bit different. So a few weeks back, I did a Q&A, Ask Me Questions, and I got tons and tons, like actually overwhelming amounts of questions from you guys on Instagram. I asked my patrons, and then I also asked you guys on YouTube. Now, I have all of those printed out here. I've got a few notes on them so that I can answer them, and I've done a little bit of research on some of these. And they are questions, all things from like, what do you like to eat, all the way up to, you know, super technical questions on the Mini. So I'm going to do my best to answer all those. If you guys have additional questions, post them in the live chat. I'll do my best to keep up with that and answer those. I hope you all are doing well. And let's start off with the questions asked by my patrons. I actually didn't get a lot of questions from you guys, and I'm guessing that's probably because I've got that live chat set up so that we can kind of talk all the time. So hopefully that means that you guys are doing well in your cars. The first question I had was from Louis, and my Mini is an original 1100 bored to 1200. Got an almost new twin SU HS4 carburetor set, and you want to install it. And you're asking if it's too big, if you need any specific adjustments, and which needle to use. Personally, I think that the twin HS4s are probably going to be just a smidge too big for that displacement. I would probably stick with a twin HS2 carburetor setup or a single HS4. I think you're going to have a better experience with your car if you stick with that size. Let's see here. Hey Mom and Dad, thanks for joining. Will, thanks for joining. Sailor Brand, welcome from Germany. The next question we have is from Jim Wade. I've got an exhaust leak. It stinks, and it stinks in the passenger space. Any ideas how to track it down? It seems worse when the engine is under load, like going uphill. Some folks say it's normal for a center-mounted exhaust, but you're not sure if you believe that. Well, so I think with the center-mounted exhaust, they are a little bit more fumey, but generally that's when you're sitting at an idle, like sitting at a traffic light, something like that. And especially when you have those tilt-open rear windows, it allows the fumes to get in there for some reason, and it's just something about the way that the Mini body is shaped and the way that exhaust is coming out. With the side exit exhaust, it's not quite as bad, but it's not that much better. I would check basically every single seam from the front of the car, so your exhaust manifold where it mounts to the engine, down at the bottom where it mounts to the connector piece. If you have a Maniflow system, it might have a Y piece down there. Those are really prone to leaking, so I would check that for sure. Moving back, every seam basically, you're just going to want to check each one of them, make sure that they're tightened. And then I also have a video on this talking about exhaust leaks and using like a seam sealer on the exhaust leak. It's made specifically for exhausts, so you can't just use like any kind of sealer. Obviously the exhaust gets hot, so you want to seal that up really good. Now, that's actually the questions I had from my patrons. I only had 2 questions. So moving on to the Instagram questions. Now these ones were a little bit sillier than the ones that I've had so far. First question is, are you a Mac or PC user? Well, I am both. I am a web developer by trade, so I use PC for development. I find that the development environment for Macs is just considerably better, but I do game on a PC. So I'm both, and I like them both for different things. Vicky Whittle asked, Classic Mini as a first car, question mark. I get this question a lot, actually, and I am kind of mixed on whether or not I would recommend a Mini as a first car. On one hand, they are really easy to work on. You can kind of get into everything, fix it with simple tools, and nothing's too difficult on the car, but they aren't reliable in the same way that a modern car is. So, you know, even things as simple as like having to grease your suspension regularly, and you know, you change your oil much more frequently on the Mini. It's going to teach you good maintenance skills on a car, but at the end of the day, you might end up being less comfortable, more frustrated as things break more frequently. So it's a trade-off. Obviously, there are safety concerns with the Mini, older Minis. New cars are just safer, and yeah, I think that if you're willing to get your hands dirty, though, a Classic Mini is a great first car. Paul Busby says, did you have any previous training on building engines before starting the channel and before working on the Mini? When I bought the Mini, I didn't have any experience aside from like simple car stereo stuff I did on my car when I was in high school. Didn't have any experience in this stuff. That said, while I owned the Mini and when I was in college, I did study to be a diesel mechanic for a short period of time. I worked with Carolina Cat, so Caterpillar, the big heavy machinery, and I did that for quite some time. Not too long though. I ended up switching back to IT and web development, obviously, as I mentioned before. So yes and no. I didn't have it when I bought the car. I don't think you need it to buy a Classic Mini. You can pick them up without, you know, any experience, as long as you're willing to learn. And let's take a stab at the questions on the live chat here. So Titchness says, do I need to do anything to my Mini in order to go from 12-inch wheels to 10-inch wheels? It has 145 Steelies on it, but I want the 165 Dunlop D1s to fit. So it depends on the kind of brakes you have on the front of your car. The Mini needs, in order to fit 10-inch wheels, you do need a smaller disc. If you have the larger disc brakes on your car, it's not going to fit the 10-inch wheels. So that's a consideration. If you have drum brakes, it's going to work perfectly. You're going to be able to put the 10-inch wheels on there. If you want to keep discs, you're going to have to move to something like a 7.5-inch disc setup, a Cooper S disc setup. All of those are going to work with 10-inch wheels. Sailor Brand says, is there a Mini community near Clarksville? There am I for holidays. In Clarksville, what state? There's a big Mini community across the kind of East Coast, and there's one across the West Coast. They often do meets in between, but most of the big Mini, Classic Mini meets here in the U.S. on the East Coast are run by Classic Minis United. It's a group I'm part of as well, and we do drives up in the mountains every year and a half. Great group, and normally it's in like Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. That's where we normally all meet. But it's folks from Ohio all the way down to Florida, and even some folks out west a little bit. So, Dan, okay, so it's in Tennessee. Awesome. I know Tennessee is a pretty long state, but we normally end up around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, so on the east side of Tennessee. So awesome area. If you want to get included in that group or anything, shoot me an email, classicminidiy@gmail.com, and I'll send you some information. Dangling Car Guy says, how big is the Mini community in the States? It's funny, US-based Classic Mini owners are kind of quiet folks, at least in my experience. Most of them are spread out. Obviously the United States is pretty big, and they will usually keep to themselves. And there's never been a big gathering that's usually more than 10 or 15 people, except for the Classic Minis United group. That one meets, that every year and a half, and there's, I think the last, at the 60th, we had over 100 people, maybe 150, I can't really remember. And then the West Coast has a huge group as well. I'm not as familiar with their meetups and everything, but 7 Mini Parts does a lot of connecting with West Coast folks as well. Now, moving back to the Instagram questions. I have a question that's from Dogo Costa, and he says, hello, do you think upgrading the back brakes from drums to discs is worth the money? Short answer is I don't think it's worth it. If you want to save weight, that is a great way to reduce the weight of the car. The rear disc brake setup, though, is not something that's necessary. 70% of your braking comes from the front of the car, so upgrading those, you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. In fact, a lot of modern cars still don't have disc brakes on the rear. Like my brand new truck still has drums on the rear. Now, granted, you're going to have better stopping power with the discs, but it's not that much better. And I think it's better to save your money and put that into the engine or into something like the interior. Let's see, what else do we have here? Alex Dean, what are your thoughts on tuning a 998 versus saving the money and buying 1275? The 1275 engines are getting increasingly hard to find and expensive. I would go for the 1275 if you can find one. I think that it's worth saving up and getting the larger displacement engine. You have a lot more options with the 1275. That said, you can still get quite a bit of power out of the 998s, especially if you're willing to do things like supercharge it or turbocharge it, something like that. That'll get you power up near the 1275s and maybe a little bit above that. So I would try and get the 1275 if you can. Mini Manshed says, some Mini YouTubers have multiple Minis. Are you even tempted to get another, and what year, style, etc.? To answer that, I would love to have more Minis, but I'm also not one to buy a lot of extra stuff. I don't like having more than I need. I wouldn't mind having maybe one more Mini and then a Fiat 500. I would prefer to have a 1275, another 1275 Mini, and I'd like to have a pickup. I really, really like the Mini pickups, so if I had to get another one, or if I was going to get another one, that would be the one I'd get. Christian Rafael says, what is the worst modification you have seen done to a Mini? Personally, I'm not a fan of the 13-inch wheel and colored plastic dashboards center console. Mini modifications are one of those things that is really in the eye of the beholder. I'm trying to think of the worst thing I've seen. I think I just don't like it when there's a huge modification done to a solid working car, like chopping the whole roof off and turning it into something that's not a car. One thing I saw a lot at the International Mini Meet was Minis turned into like giant kitchen ovens, or like the ice cream shop ones, and that was really cool. But if it was a Mini that was modified, that was in good shape, that's probably my least favorite kind of modification. Let's see here. Move on to the next question. NGO Limit 62 has a question. True or false, do not clutch when starting up a classic Mini? Now I know the answer to this, or at least I have an opinion about this. I'm curious to see what you guys think. So I'm going to give you a second. Do you think it's true that you should not put your clutch in while you're starting up your car? Or false, do you think you shouldn't or do you think you can and should put your clutch in when you start up your Mini? I'll give you a couple seconds here. So, my thought process on that and my opinion on that is that you shouldn't. You shouldn't put the clutch in when you start the car, specifically because you are putting pressure and load on your thrust washers and your thrust bearings inside on your crankshaft. And this is before that they have an opportunity to get lubricated and oil pressed up into the spaces that needs it. So personally, I don't put my clutch in. I think that it adds additional wear to your engine. And long term, you're going to see some negative effects from that. Let's see what you guys thought. No clutch. depress the clutch is best practice in case it's in gear. So Will is on the opposite end of that. So Luis Afonso says, about the springs, tell us your thoughts, do you recommend? So I've actually gotten this question a lot lately. I don't know if a lot of people are just considering springs, upgrading their car. So a couple things to consider. One, I still have the springs on my car. I still love the springs on my car. I wouldn't change them. I'm very, very happy with them. That said, they need to be installed correctly. It's extremely important that they're installed in the way that they need to be. Specifically, the springs are less tall than a cone is. So your cone is like this, your cone's probably like this tall, where the spring is a little bit smaller. Now this is a very controversial opinion. I don't want to hide that. A lot of people disagree with me on this. But what does need to be done is you need to get a larger under bump stop for the bottom of the top arm. So, your trumpet sits here, your spring sits here, and with the smaller spring, what happens is if your wheel gets the opportunity to droop all the way down and it goes too far, the spring can actually become dislodged, and then when it regains its actual load, the spring is either caught or bound up in a way that causes damage. So it's so important to have that enlarged bump stop under the top arm so that it can't droop any farther than it would need to in order to keep that spring up there. I would not put springs on an ultra low car. I would stick with cones in that scenario. And I like the ride of them. I like that they are metal springs. That means they're going to last a lot longer than the cones. So, just some things to keep in mind. Let's see here. Christian says, did the UK live up to its reputation of being cold and wet for IMM, or would you prefer we made it worse next time you visit? IMM was pretty wet and pretty rainy, but I actually had a really good time. I met and got to connect up with all the other mini YouTubers that are in the UK, and it's an awesome group of people. And even though it was rainy, even though it was windy, I wouldn't change a thing. I loved everybody. I loved the whole experience. And I have been to the UK before, so I knew what to expect weather-wise, and it was pretty much the same, just with a little bit more wind at IMM. Luis says, Cole, where are you? So I'm assuming that you're asking in terms of where in the States I am. I'm in North Carolina, so kind of middle of the East Coast in the U.S., and I'm in my workshop right now. All right, so I'm going to move back to some of these Instagram questions. We have a ton of YouTube questions to go through too, so bear with me here. I'm going to do my best to answer as many of them as I can. I'm going to try and target some. I've picked some of the more, good meaty questions as opposed to some of the others. So I have a question here that says, how much horsepower is the Supercharger going to add? And so my goal, I don't know the direct exact number that it's going to add, but my goal is 150 horsepower on the car. Excuse me. And so the last time I had my car on a dyno, it was right before I did the whole Supercharger build. So it was standard engine 1293 with an HS6 on it. And I had 67 horsepower. So, that's a lot of extra power. My goal is 150, but basically anything over 100, I'm gonna be a happy camper. So I do have a question here from Lewis John Williams 11. What's been the biggest struggle for you on your Mini building wise? So I will say that I think the biggest thing related to the Mini itself has been the balance of trying to get the Mini right and saving money, or kind of waiting a little bit longer and doing it right. There's a lot of things that I had wished that I had gone back and waited a little bit longer and gotten a better job done. The paint is one really, really big sore spot for me. I wish that I had taken more time, saved up a little bit more money, and painted it much better at a reputable shop. Instead, I got it done in kind of like a backyard shop. The guy gave me a great deal, but that was one of the biggest things. For me, building-wise, I bought this when I still lived in an apartment, so it's always been a struggle to find a good workshop and a place to work on it. Only recently have I gotten an opportunity to live somewhere that has really great amenities for me. Aside from it not being an enclosed garage, obviously my workshop is awesome, and this was done by my wife, and she did such an incredible job helping me organize this. There's all the storage up here, everything's just great, and so that was one big piece. Now, I have a special announcement. One of my friends over in the UK, Steve Blakemore, he is Turbo Cooper Sport on Instagram. He has an incredible turbocharged MPI. If you haven't seen it, he does also have a YouTube channel, which is the same name, if I remember correctly. Today is his birthday, so if all of you could, please wish him a happy birthday in the chat. Very, very happy birthday to you, Steve, and I saw that you got your engine running some more today, so congratulations on that. Great birthday present. All right, I'm doing my best to keep up with the live chat here. If you have any questions, but it is moving pretty quick. Now, this question came to me from Clubman Mini on Instagram, and they asked, what made you start the YouTube channel? And that is a question I've had a few times as well. And, I didn't start the channel specifically so I could make it big and become like a huge YouTuber and retire and go live on an island or something like that. I wanted to, one, learn how to work on my Mini, but two, I wanted to give people the opportunity to learn from my mistakes and to also, make the barrier of entry working on their cars much lower. People have this tendency to kind of hoard knowledge. For whatever reason, there's just people, it's like they learn something and then they think, well, if I help other people learn how to do this, it somehow belittles what I've learned. I think that's all pretty stupid. Personally, I think knowledge should be free. And in my case, I do my best to make the information on my channel free. Obviously, there's ads supported, and I give you guys the opportunity to support me, in the channel and everything. But my goal is to always offer the information that I have on this channel incomplete. Everything I know that I share, I do my best to share all accurate information. And I want to keep, the Mini community alive, and I want to keep the car working community, getting in there and working on your car. I want to keep that community alive too. So that's why I started the channel. Let's see. Awesome. I'm so glad to see you guys wishing Mr. Steve a happy birthday. Flat Cap Garage says, what is your opinion on the high-low spring combo? I have the high-low spring combo in my car. I'm really, really happy with it. I went into it a little bit more detail just a little bit ago. So once this video finishes, if you want to roll back and see that, I can kind of go into it in detail. Dan the Car Guy asks, when you installed the radio on your Mini, how did you wire it in? So I have kind of a different style radio in my car. I have a Kenwood amplifier that actually has no head, it has kind of like a built-in head unit, so it's the amp and head unit built into one module. Then you have a little control box that sits away, and that's what you control the audio with. So that sits in my dash, and then I have the amp sitting underneath the rear seats. And so from there, I have those wired directly to the battery, and then a remote switch that's wired to my ignition. Pretty straightforward, and then obviously the amp goes to all the speakers. John Abiro says, hi Cole, can the engine be identified in a strip down? I bought an allegedly A-Series 850cc engine in box, but on investigation of the engine number, it is coming up as an 1100 Clubman Special. So I would just check the bore size. So I don't recall what the exact measurement is for an 1100. Maybe if somebody knows that off the top of their head, they can post that in the chat. But the easiest way to identify the size of the engine is to measure the bore. The 850 is the smallest displacement engine, and I don't know, maybe there's like the car is coming up with an 850 because that's what it was originally in it, and maybe somebody upgraded it to the Clubman Special 1100 at some point. It's really hard to tell, but if you do have the engine number on the actual block, sometimes they fall off, sometimes they're not printed. If you have that, John Guess at Guessworks has a pretty good engine identifier where you can plug in your information and it'll tell you what it is. All right, so going to move to the YouTube questions, and there's a lot of them. So I'm going to do my best to answer a good bit of these, but there's no way I'm going to be able to get through all of these. I'd be here all day, and it would be pretty boring for you guys, I think. Mad Max asked, how many minis have you owned? Well, one mini, that didn't come out quite right. I've owned one mini. So this single mini, but I've worked on a lot of engines. I've worked on a lot of cars with my buddy up at his house. So technically, I've only actually owned a single mini. Hasra says, your knowledge base is much more advanced than a DIY mechanic. What is your source to get advice or help if you need one? Is 7 Enterprise your partner? Do they give you sort of information on a collaborative agreement? The majority of my knowledge comes from reading lots of technical information. Haynes manuals, technical documentation like Dave Vizard's book. And I do talk with 7 Mini Parts quite frequently on the phone, but usually it's not about technical things. While we do have a conversation here and there about it, most of my convos with them are related to episodes that we're working on together, things like that. So just lots of technical reading and actually getting out and doing stuff and basically breaking things on the car. Next question is, this is from Adam Campion. He says, how many pairs of sandals do you own? Well, there's never enough sandals. There's never enough. And I don't even know how many I own. But can you ever have enough flip-flops? Really? Mini Performance asked, do you get sick of stupid comments on videos? What engine mod are you eyeing up next? How many miles a year do you do in the Mini? And what's the longest trip you've done in the Mini to a car show? If you could build a classic Mini with an unlimited budget, what would it be? That was definitely more than one question, Mini Performance. So yes, I do get really tired of stupid comments on videos, and I don't think questions are stupid. I actually think that any question, I think, no question is really stupid. People are trying to learn, and it's okay to not know something. What really, really chaps my bum is when people are getting into the comments and either saying completely incorrect information, being rude for the sake of being rude. There are two ways you can deliver information. You can deliver it with lemons or lemonade, and there's no reason to be an asshole unless someone's being rude to you. And so people getting in there, and maybe they have some good information, maybe they have something that I missed, which happens all the time, but work on delivering that information in a nice way. It helps people learn, and I'm a patient person, but not everybody else is, so I don't know. What engine mod am I eyeing up next? I need to take a break from engine mods. My bank account needs to take a break from engine mods, so once I get the Mini working, it's going to stay that way for a while. How many miles do I do in the Mini? Last year I think I did 12 or 13,000 miles, I think, give or take. The longest trip I've ever done in the Mini into a car show was about 6 hours away. It was from from Charlotte up where in North Carolina down to Atlanta, Georgia. It took 6 hours because it was in a Mini, but I think that the longest duration might have been the trip from North Wales down to Bristol when I was at IMM. But I think that's because I was with a bunch of people and we all kept stopping and stuff, like getting and taking breaks and things like that. So it ended up taking a lot longer. Let's see here. Mini Manshed says, "Do you do mini shows? Are there many within range of the of my house?" And I do lots of car shows. There are not really mini shows here in the U.S. Not in the same way that there are in the U.K. So generally speaking, I go to car shows. I'll go to like Euro car shows, things focused on British cars, but unfortunately there aren't just mini shows here. Let's see here. Alex Toon says, "Do you miss Bad Wolf 2.0? Yes, man, of course I miss Bad Wolf 2.0. That was an awesome car. So for those of you who don't know, I got this as a souvenir as well. So when we went to IMM, I drove Alex Toon's blue Mini, and it's almost the same blue as my car, so we named it Bad Wolf 2.0, and drove that from North Wales all the way down to Bristol. It was an automatic SPI Mini 1275, and it was an awesome car. It just was great. Only overheated once, and honestly, it was super reliable. Super reliable. Mr. CRX says, "Has the virus delayed any of the channel projects?" Yes, it has. Mostly in the delivery times to get parts from here or from the UK over to here. But even just getting local parts and nuts and bolts, things like that, you know, with the quarantine here, it's been pretty difficult, actually. Need some water. Just to confirm, you guys can hear me, right? Everything I'm saying. I'm not just like talking into the void, right? Well, Carlos says, "Hey Cole, any plans on fitting an aftermarket AC on Bad Wolf? Since AC was available on the right-hand drive minis in the Japanese market, would be a nice project to fit one on the left-hand drive minis. Greetings from Portugal." Yeah, so I am not going to be installing an AC on my car. I've thought about it many, many times because it gets hot in Charlotte during the summer. I'm talking like 40 plus Celsius here, and it would be really great. But with the Supercharger and with some of the other stuff I'm going to be putting in the engine bay here soon, it's not going to fit, unfortunately. I just don't have any room to add the compressor and all the stuff in there. So it would be nice, probably not going to do it. Let's see here. Thomas Adam asked, "Hi, I'm from South Africa and own a 1275 HLE. Can only leaded fuel be used, or does it really matter?" So earlier valves and valve seats were made to work with leaded fuel, and the leaded fuel actually provided a certain amount of damper and cushion to those valves and valve seats. So when you removed the lead is a very dense, soft metal. When you remove the lead out of the gasoline, it creates a much harsher environment in your cylinders and in your combustion chambers. So yes, you should run leaded fuel or a lead additive if you haven't upgraded the valves and valve seats. If they have been upgraded to unleaded seats and valves, then it's a non-issue. You can run unleaded fuel without any problem. Graham Ashmore says, "You're so lucky to have that Mini in a climate like they are in a climate like that. They are unlike the UK where they dissolve away." I will say it does rain a good bit during the summer here too, though. So we get 40 plus degree weather and it's like 100% humidity here. That said, it definitely doesn't rain as much as it does in the UK. Dan the Car Guy says, "Mine has lead balls in the fuel tank." Oh, that's pretty cool. Never heard of that before. I guess that makes sense. Does the lead kind of like soak into the gasoline as it's sitting in the gas tank, and then that's when then you end up having leaded fuel. That's pretty cool. Mini Performance says 40 degrees Celsius, sweating my bits off here at 15. 15? It's not even that cold here right now. Let's see. Paul Hudson says, do you regret having a roll cage? No, I don't. Not one bit. If I had a roll cage that maybe had the cross member across the back or extended up to the front, I might be a little bit more annoyed with it. However, I have thought about extending the roll cage up to the front of the car. I love my roll cage. I like the additional security it gives me, and it's something to, it's weird to say, but like when you're just driving down the road chilling, you can kind of like rest your hand on it. I don't know, it makes driving just really comfortable. Don't know how to explain it. Enrique Roig says, can I mount a cylinder head 1275 and a stock block 850? I don't think you can mount it to an 850. I think the cylinders are too small on that. You can mount it to a 998, and I've done a whole thing on how to do that. You can see that in my previous videos. It's called the Super 998, and I show you guys how to install a 1275 head on a 998 engine. Mark Jackson, that's funny, you are asking any opinions on VTEC swap minis, and that was actually the next question I was going to answer. So, VTEC minis. This is a common thing for anyone who has, mostly, this is a question I get a lot because a lot of people here in the US are like, oh, I've seen minis, but they're VTEC swaps. That's cool. Are you going to do that to your car? And I think, how do I put this? VTEC minis are really, really hard to drive. Even when you put a ton of energy into making sure that the power delivery is in a smooth way, the tons of extra power that's coming from that VTEC engine, which is obviously not a super high output engine, but in the Mini it's a lot. And the torque steer alone on a VTEC Mini is incredibly difficult to deal with, in my opinion. So I think that they are really cool swaps. I think that, I don't think that people should stop doing them. But for like a daily driver Mini, something that I'm going to run all the time, if I was to do a VTEC swap, I would do a rear wheel drive VTEC swap, so that the power is coming from the rear and you don't have as much torque steer. It's the short wheelbase of the Mini makes it extremely difficult to smooth out that torque steer on the front of a VTEC Mini. Mini Performance says, Cole, you must have driven some bad ones, and I've driven a few, and as far as I've driven some that have been basically kit built from folks here in the UK or US. And I've driven some that were budget built in the garage, and all of them drove pretty much the same to me, I will say. But it's just not my cup of tea. I think they're cool though. All right, let's see what other questions we have here. 1990 Glass says, how are you at welding? Any chance you can show us more of that when you do another project? So I am trash at welding. I have had training in welding, but I've never done it in an extended way. So I understand the concepts. I understand how to do it correctly, but I'm not good at doing it correctly. And I would say that if you're looking for some guidance on how to weld, check out some of the other mini channels that are out there. Classic Mini Workshop, the DJSE, Mini Tom, folks like that, they have a lot more experience at welding and they've done a lot more videos on that. So I would check them out. They have much, much better experience and are going to give you much better guidance than I am. Let's see. Victor Christensen says, what can cause my 998 engine being very slow when revving the engine sluggish? Is it too thick an oil in the damper? It can be a few things. So it could be poor fueling. It could be the oil's too thick. there's a lot of variables in that. I have a tuning video that talks about how to tune your SU carburetor. And I would probably go through that, check to make sure that everything's, you have the correct fueling. That's probably going to be the biggest one if you haven't changed the oil. Kevin Shale says, hello Cole, what oil are you using to run in the new engine on the motor, on the supercharged motor? So, well, I had a bottle sitting around here somewhere. I use Castrol VR1, the high zinc oil. It's the same oil that I use when I'm running the car as well. It works great for me. The high zinc content is going to provide that bedding in, that cushion, as well as the assembly lubricant that I put on everything when I'm building it. So basically, same engine oil I always use, and I just change it sooner. Basically, after I've run in the engine, I've had an opportunity to drive it, that's when I change the oil. Daniel Ventura says, hey Cole, I'm 17 and I'm wanting to buy a Mini in the US. What do you think is a good price for a Project Mini and what should I prepare for? Every Mini is a little bit different and it depends on the year that you're looking for. So earlier cars like mine have actually come up in price quite a lot, even for projects. So that is something to keep in mind. Goodness. And later Minis are going to be less expensive, but for whatever reason, later Minis seem to rust a little bit more. I don't really know why. You might be better off trying to find a Mini that's overseas and importing it, because importing a Mini costs usually around $1,200, estimated to get it from from Europe over here. And so that can come into any port on the East Coast. Usually they come into like Charleston, New York, those ports, and you can find them really, really cheap over there still. The US market is getting really inflated in prices, so it is getting much more difficult to buy them. Dean Curley says, hi from New Zealand, what carb for a 1340 or would you consider a Weber? I loved the HS6 on my car. I had a 1293, but that carb is going to be suitable for your displacement as well. It's the same size as an HIF 44. That is an alternative you can pick up, or dual HS4s, although that might be just a little too much. I don't know, you might get away with that. A Weber is going to suck fuel and it's going to be loud. It depends on what you want in the car. If you're not bothered by loudness, then a Weber is going to be awesome. So I'm going to share with you guys something. I'm going to bring you out to the garage here. I have, on that last episode, we got the engine in. The engine has been mostly assembled. I'm not going to share whether or not I've been able to start it yet or not. I'm going to save that for another episode. But let's head out there. I want to show you guys how it's looking so far. So we have the majority of the engine put together. You can see valve cover's on now. The supercharger is installed, belts are tight, intake is on, and honestly, I'm really excited it's starting to come together. What do you guys think of the look and color and everything that is that we've got here? And do you have any questions about the engine itself? Flat Cap Garage asked, do you have any opinions on the steering wheel drop brackets that have been popping up more and more recently? They are nice. It depends on how you are built as a person. For me, a drop bracket doesn't work too well because it puts it too low. I'm a very tall person. But for some folks, it helps a lot. You just got to assess whether or not it makes sense for you and the way that you're built. Some of them are way overpriced. There's companies out there that offer them for much less money. Mark Jackson says it's fuel injected now, correct? Yep. So this right here is a Sniper EFI, has electronic fuel injection. That is from Holley. So this is fuel injected, but it's still using a distributor system. So this controls fueling. It's very similar to the SPI, so it controls the fueling, trying to keep the correct measurements at load, and it has a O2 sensor down in the exhaust, but it doesn't control timing. Though it does have the ability to do that, it doesn't on my setup. So, and then obviously standard throttle assembly, supercharged, so you have the fuel injected here, air and fuel mixed here, goes through the supercharger down into the engine, and then boom. Mini Performance is asking for a closer look. Yep, let me just rotate this around here. Pop you off of the tripod. Sorry if it's shaky. So I've got my phone plugged in so it doesn't die while I'm live streaming. So you can see here, standard distributor running up to spark plugs, standard radiator for right now, and the supercharger sits right here. My fuel line feed is here, the returns on the back side. Just barely clears the master cylinders. And then I have an uprated clutch in there. Obviously you can't see that. But Sniper EFI fueling system, all that. Then we're gonna come over here to the right side. And you can see there's actually quite a bit of room between the bulkhead and the actual supercharger. Belt tensioner is down there. The belt runs down and has and it mates with the actual same pulley that used the alternator and everything like that. And then on the back side here, you've got the piping that goes into the heater core inside the car. Now, I'm gonna set you guys back up on the tripod in case you have any other questions. Wait, the vacuum advance tube is missing. Yep, that's because the car has not been timed yet, and you don't time it with the vacuum advance installed. Grandma's Egg says, do you have any go-to sealant for engine rebuilds and gearbox, etc.? So I went inside to grab this. I'm actually about to run out of this, but this is my favorite sealer, like, ever. This stuff is black, so it doesn't pop out and show anywhere when you're using it, but it is super, super good. I use this on all my engine rebuilds. Grandma's Egg says, question, do you use any fuel additives? If so, not reason. So I don't need any fuel additives. I just run unleaded fuel. I usually run premium here, which is 93 octane. Yeah, I don't run any additives because the valve seats have been replaced with unleaded seats, so there's not really any reason to. Mark Jackson, where did you get your quick release hood system? I've been wanting to do that for some time now. Let me just say that I don't love the quick release system I have. So it's a standard latch up on the front here, and then it's just hood pins on the back. So I drilled holes in the actual hood here, you can see, and it just pops through there. So it's not really a quick release per se, it's just a hood pin setup. Kevin Shale says, you are not running a decompression plate, are you, due to your pistons? Yeah, that's right. So I have the 18cc deep dish pistons, so that decompresses the engine, so you don't need a decompression plate. All right, bring you guys back inside here. Sorry for the bouncing around. Victor says, do you have any ethanol in the fuel in the US? If yes, does it create any problems? So we do have ethanol in the fuel. There are some places you can buy like zero ethanol gasoline, but most places have some percentage of ethanol. It doesn't cause any problems. It's pretty common here, so everything's pretty much, it's configured to work in that way. The Holley EFI works fine with it. That said, I'm going to get much better performance with no ethanol in my gasoline, or if I had E85 conversion where I could run something like that. That said, I do not have that on my car, nor do I plan to. So I just deal with the ethanol. Oh, let's see here. Going back through the questions here to see if I missed anything. Bloody tight package in there? Yeah, you're telling me. I've had the Supercharger on and off now 15 times. Whether it's to bolt up something else, or I forgot to tighten something, or I found that a cable is too close to the belt, something like that. So don't let anyone tell you that it's just a direct bolt-on mod. It is something that takes some time to get everything, you know, in its right place and working the way it needs to. Flat Cap Garage says very tidy bay. Some Supercharged Minis have a very messy, busy engine bay. Yeah, so I've done everything I can to try and reduce the mess, and I've still got a lot more to do that is going to reduce the mess even more. So it's all, you know, it's cumulative. You know, I'm about probably 50% of the way done with the engine bay. Will Murphy says, you have gone quiet, mate, but can hear you, but could be much louder. Let me just pull this a little closer, get a close-up of my face. See if that's any better. Louise, what was your question? I did not see it on the original video or on the Patreon post. If you want to ask it here, I'll make sure I get it answered for you. Adam Sanders says, I need to get motivated on my classic mini project so bad. Well, it's been sitting for 2 years now. Yeah, man, get on it. You're going to be happy that you did it. I mean, once you get it running and you drive it down the road, it's going to be worth it. Mini Performance says, can the Sniper run and compensate for ethanols with a flex fuel sensor? You know, I'm not really sure. I'd have to do a little bit of research on that. They don't advertise it as such, but that's not to say that maybe they don't have some sort of configuration. As far as I know, though, it doesn't. I'd have to do a little bit more research. Victor says, which modification add-on have paid off the most on your Mini? Well, I haven't driven the Supercharger yet, so that one's still in the contention. It might be that, but I would say probably. In the past, some of the head work that I've had done to the engine, I don't use the same cylinder head anymore. But in the past, I will say that the cylinder head work I had done to the car was probably the biggest noticeable difference that I had is in terms of power. And then internal engine, internal passenger compartment things that I've done that have made it quieter. Those have had a pretty big impact because I drive my car so much. Kevin Shale says, what did you decide on the LED lights? I actually am almost done filming an episode about LED bulbs. I don't know if I have, you can see, maybe that's what reminded you. I don't have the LED bulb out right now, but I will show that to you guys once I get to that stage. Where did I put that bulb? I don't even know. Oh yeah, here we go. Actually, I'll show you guys a sneak peek. So this is a Dapper Lighting LED bulb. So it's an actual LED main bulb in here, and it has a little control module and an H4 plug on the back, as well as some active cooling. So I have a whole video coming out here soon about these, but this is what I'm installing on my Mini. So LED conversion, here I come. Paul Belton says, what's the minimum engine work that needs to be done, needs doing to run a Supercharger with a Weber? At minimum, you have to add a decompression plate. If you're not going to do any sort of piston work, you're not going to change the cylinders, nothing like that, you have to add a decompression plate, which reduces the compression in the cylinders. Then you put your standard head back on, and then a supercharger with a new alternator belt pulley, so that you can run the V-belt, as well as, so you can run the multi-ribbed belt for the supercharger and the V-belt for your alternator, and then obviously the supercharger on the back and the Weber. You can get away with basically just that if you wanted to. William Murphy says, Cole, thoughts on doing YouTube live videos for newbies? One thing I would recommend is to make sure that you have water, because your voice gets kind of raw after a little while. It's actually starting to get there right now. And then, don't get too wrapped up in like being proper and everything being right, because when you're live, you're going to make mistakes. It's not a big deal. So just have a good time, talk with people, and just chill. Yeah, that'd probably be the biggest one. Louis says, okay, I have 1200cc with now two HS4. Oh, yes. So I think the two HS4s are too big for the 1200 setup if it's bored over from an 1100. I would probably go with twin HS2s or a single HS4. I think you're going to be happier with that. The two HS4s are going to be a lot of air and fuel, and I don't think that your engine's going to be able to utilize it. Dan the Car Guy says, Cole, would silicon fuel lines be better than the standard rubber? Really, anything that's rated for fuel is going to be ideal. Fuel is a very corrosive fluid, so if you leave it in something that's not intended for fuel use, it will melt through it. It'll cook through it eventually. Rubber's fine, or silicone that's rated to use for fuel would be my recommendation. Kevin Shales, that is for the headlights. I have not found, I haven't decided on the spotlights yet. CIBIE, I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce that or not. They have those awesome LEDs. Actually, I think you were the one that recommended them to me. But they are crazy expensive, and I just can't justify spending that much on LED bulbs right now. They were, like, seriously, in the US, they were $200 per bulb, per lamp, which means that I would be in for $800 just to have 4 spotlights on the front of my car. Mark Jackson, thanks for joining in. I appreciate it, and good luck getting back to work. Sorry you have to work today. Victor asked, do you have any idea about when they started making the heads unleaded from the factory? Mine's an 86998. Do you know if this is unleaded from the factory? I am not sure when they started. I don't even know when the conversion from leaded to unleaded fuel happened. I think it might have been in the 70s, so you might be good, but I'm definitely not sure on that one. Louis, for the headlights, I believe they are DOT approved. I'm like 99% sure on that one, and it's a company called Dapper Lighting, and so this one is the OE7 model, and it does require some modification to your headlight cups in order to make them fit. Like I said, I've got a whole video. I'm going to be covering that very soon. Let's see here. Toyota Tacoma, it could be considered off-road if you modified it. Mine's pretty much a city truck. No audio. Okay, it's back. Okay. What was the last thing you guys heard? I'm into Hondas, I'm into Toyotas, I'm into lots of imports. I'm not really into domestic, as in domestic US cars. They just don't really do it for me. I can't think of an American car that really gets me going. Maybe a Bronco. I really like the Broncos. Take that back. But definitely other cars. Overseas cars tend to get me going a little bit more. Yeah, Kevin, I might get them in the future. I don't know. I feel stupid spending $200 on a single lamp on lights that I don't use every single day. I do use them. I use my headlamps, or rather, I use my rally lamps actually quite a lot. When I'm up in the mountains, driving the car at night, things like that, I definitely use those lights, and they're awesome. Everyone's like, oh, you bought those big rally lights, but you never use them, blah, blah, blah. Not true. Not true. I definitely use mine. Final question is, how many horsepower do you expect to get with the Supercharger and the EFI? Target horsepower is 150. Hopefully, I'm able to get that. Martin says, I'm planning on changing my windscreen rubber. Any tips? I think you can actually use modern windscreen wipers all in the Mini. They don't look obviously as classic, but I think you can actually change them out for a newer model. That said, the ones that Mini Spares and Mini Sport and all the different companies make and sell, they don't work that great, but they look a lot more period. Dan the Car Guy says, I'm keeping mine original, so keeping the headlights stock halogen. Yep. I've had halogen bulbs on my car for the whole time I've owned it, and they've been fine. I just wanted something brighter, and I was apprehensive to get something that didn't look OEM. I'm really not a big fan of the ones that are like black or that have the big eyeball in the middle of them. Not really my cup of tea. So now that there are options that are OEM looking, very happy camper. Mini Tom says, question for you and the floor if I'm honest. Heritage Scuttle or Magnum? I know the Heritage will fit better, but is it worth 100 pounds more? Has anybody fitted a Magnum one with success? That kind of goes back to the thing at the beginning of this live chat, and I will say that many times working on my car, I wished I had waited a little bit longer and spent a little bit more money on nicer stuff rather than getting the cheaper thing and regretting it in the future. That said, I have not worked with the Magnum panels, and I only have worked with Heritage panels. I didn't have a lot that needed to replace on my car when I initially got it, so I can't comment too much on the Magnum ones and how well they'll work. Let's see here. Oh, Martin, the windscreen rubber seal. My tip to do that is to have two people. A second set of hands really helps with that. Take your time and 100% get the tool that's for this job. I have one here somewhere. I have the cheap tool. Perfect example of wishing I'd spent a little bit more and got the pro tool. This is the windscreen rubber tool that I have. They do make ones that work a little bit better than this. I would get water and some soap, mix it together, and then use that to help lubricate that seal into the actual locking tab into the rubber seal. It's really finicky, and you're going to be cussing a lot, but it's not really that bad. Let's see. Grandma's eggs sit at the road wheel's final torque value. I don't know what my torque's going to be, and it's going to be heavy. It's going to be more power down lower. That's part of why I went with a Supercharger actually, is most of my driving is around mountain roads, so I'm in lower gears. and I am driving and wanting to be able to pull out of corners, things like that. I am on the highway from time to time, but most of my driving is in the city or in mountain roads like that. So Supercharger fit my driving style, and the way the power is delivered in a Supercharger fit my driving style a lot better. Louis says 150 horsepower is the reliability okay? Um, I won't have an answer to that until I drive the car for a while. I'm building the car with reliability in mind, though, so I've put things that are going to extend the life of the transmission, extend the life of the drive, or the final drive, all those things. So doing my best to make it reliable, but at the end of the day, it's still an old A series engine, so I can only expect so much. Grandma's Egg says, are you a fan of waterless coolant? I have a whole video on waterless coolant. Evans Waterless actually sponsored the video at the time, and I ran that in my car all the way up until I took the engine out to do the Supercharger and was really, really happy with it. That said, the Supercharger is a very hot engine application, so I ended up going back to water on this build, specifically because water is still the most efficient cooler. So Evans Waterless is going to help you prevent boil over, and it's also going to help prevent corrosion because it doesn't boil as hot. But I wanted to make sure I was maximizing the cooling potential in my engine, so that's why I went with regular 50-50 antifreeze setup this time. Dan the Car Guy says, Cole, which lenses do you prefer, clear or colored? I prefer clear lenses. I'm assuming you mean on the headlamps or on the driving lamps. I prefer clear. It looks a lot more classic to me. But I will say that some cars look really good with those smoky or the black lenses. I think they look pretty cool on some cars. Tom Shorrock's car, actually. I'm a big fan of him on that car. Victor, have you had any performance or knocking problems when using only 92? We have 93 here. That's what premium is here in the US. I haven't had any problems with it, and it's pretty crazy. From what I understand, the octane levels are even higher than that overseas, so like 93 is actually kind of low. But no, I haven't had any problems with it. In fact, I used to run 89 in the car, and I didn't have any problems then. Will, thanks for joining, and have a good evening. What final drive ratio do you recommend for cruising, not city or short trips? So the final drive I would recommend for like cruising on the highway, things like that, it depends on the displacement of the engine. So in your case with the 1200cc, I wouldn't go, I would probably stick with a 3.1 or even maxed out at maybe a 3.0. I don't think I would go to 2.95. Although the 2.95 is going to be better on the highway, it's just not. It's going to be a dog in the city with a lower displacement engine. Dan the Car Guy says, I've heard not to use waterless coolant as if you get a leak. You can add water to the waterless coolant. It's okay to mix it. The only drawback is that you have to then remove the water from the system again, so you have to basically empty the system and then re-prep the system, take all the fluid out, and then redo the whole process. So if you get a leak, there's nothing you can add water. It's not going to hurt it. But you're right, it is a lot more work if you want to keep the coolant all waterless. So that is a trade-off. Let's see here. Jane says, hi Cole, I need to change my fuel pump on my classic 998. Any tips on doing this work? Is it the old mechanical fuel pump on the back of the engine block? If it is, I would recommend swapping that out for an electric fuel pump. I do not like those mechanical pumps, but if you want to keep it, it's just 2 bolts on the back, pop it off, and then put the new one on. But if it's, I would say there are these little clamps that I use, and nope, that's not the right drawer. Yeah, they look like this, and they allow you to clamp the hose down. So you stick the hose here, clamp it down, and it helps either stop the fluid from leaking out, or to help reduce the amount of liquid you lose, aka the gasoline that you lose. These have been great, and actually that's really the only thing, is just do your best to keep the fuel from spilling. Maybe do it after the engine, or after the fuel tank is empty or close to empty. Dave Jag actually has a good tip here. Apart from the damaged radiator core with Evans, you don't leak in the same way, as the pressure is so low compared to water. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You are running the engine at a lower pressure with that Evans coolant, so it's less likely to have issues with leaks where it's pushing the fluid out around the seals, something like that. So I am going to be wrapping up this live stream. If you guys have any other questions, now is the time to ask them. We've been going for a little over an hour, and my throat's starting to get a little raw, so I think I'm going to cap it off here, unless you guys have any other questions you'd like to ask me. Let me give you guys a minute here, because there's a delay. Victor says, do you think banana manifolds are worth it if you don't really have any other crazy mods? Adding some additional flow is never going to be a bad idea on that exhaust. I think that they're worth it, especially now if you're going from the Maniflow exhaust or one of these larger exhaust manifolds down to a small pipe. It's not really going to help you, but if you aren't, I think it's worth it. Mini Performance, I actually don't drink beer. I've got trouble with wheat. I drink wine, and I drink things like harder liquors. They don't seem to bother me, but maybe next time I'll have a nice glass of wine behind me instead of some water. Although I think that would make my throat hurt a little bit worse. Thanks everybody for joining. Dan the Car Guy, to answer your question about Yokohama tires, I had Falcons on my car for ages. I have Yokohamas now. I will never go back. The Yokohamas are awesome. Awesome. All right, folks. Well, have a wonderful evening. If it's evening time where you're at, if it's the afternoon, enjoy the rest of the sunlight. And if it's morning, enjoy the morning. Thanks so much for joining, and I will see you guys on the next episode, which we're going to try and start the engine. So hopefully we'll get that done.